Kirstjen Nielsen resigns as Trump's Homeland Security Secretary. Washington. Kirstjen Nielsen, the Homeland Security Secretary, resigned on Sunday after meeting with President Trump, ending a tumultuous tenure in charge of the Border Security Agency that had made her the target of the president's criticism. "I have determined that it is the right time for me to step aside," Ms. Nielsen said in a resignation letter. "I hope that the next 3 people familiar with the meeting said." Ms. Nielsen had requested it to plan a way forward at the border, in part thinking she could have a reasoned conversation with Mr. Trump about her role. After the meeting, the move comes just 2 days after Mr. Trump, who has repeatedly expressed anger at a rise in migrants at the southwestern border, to run Immigration and Customs Enforcement because he wanted the agency to go in a tougher direction. The abrupt resignation by Ms. Nielsen was unusual because the Department of Homeland Security currently does not have a deputy secretary, who would normally take the reins. The president said among the possible replacements for Ms. Nielsen in the long term is Ken Cuccinelli, the former Virginia Attorney General, who is a favorite among conservative activists and who fits the profile that Mr. Trump wants the next Homeland Secretary to have, people familiar with the discussions said. Ms. Nielsen had been pressured by Mr. Trump to be more aggressive in stemming the influx at the border, people familiar with their discussions in recent months said. Ms. Nielsen's entire time in the job was spent batting back suspicion from the president, even as he told people he liked how she performed on television and enjoyed dealing with her personally. The president berated Ms. Nielsen regularly, calling her at home early in the mornings to demand that she take action to stop migrants from entering the country, including doing things that were clearly illegal, like blocking all migrants from seeking asylum. Those responses only infuriated Mr. Trump further. The president's fury in a cabinet meeting surrounded by her peers. Mr. Trump and Stephen Miller, his top immigration advisor, have privately but regularly complained about Ms. Nielsen. They blamed her for she also lost a powerful protector when Mr. Kelly, her mentor, left his job as White House Chief of Staff at the beginning of the year. Mr. Kelly multiple White House officials said she had grown deeply paranoid in recent months, after numerous stories about her job being on the line. She also had in early 2019, as the number of migrant families from Central American countries surged to unprecedented levels, the president's fury at Ms. Nielsen did, too. He repeatedly one day after Ms. Nielsen traveled to Honduras to sign a regional compact with officials from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, Mr. Trump for the Central American countries and threatened to seal off the United States border with Mexico. Ms. Nielsen embraced the president's crisis language as apprehensions of migrants at the border shot up to thousands per day. But in recent days, on Friday, Mr. Trump traveled with Ms. Nielsen and Mr. McAleenan to Calexico, California, to buy Central American families overwhelming detention facilities and border security resources. But despite several stories about how much better her relationship with Mr. Trump was, Ms. Nielsen never learned how to manage him, people familiar with their discussions said. He often felt and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was not an admirer of Ms. Nielsen, several administration officials said. That came to a head while Mr. Trump often blamed Ms. Nielsen for the surge in migrant crossings. She is likely to be remembered for leading the department during the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy at the southwestern border, which initially resulted in the separation of thousands of migrant children from their families. Earlier this year, an intense backlash ensued, and the Department of Homeland Security was unprepared to deal with separating nearly 3,000 children from their parents. Hampered by misstep after misstep, Kirstjen Nielsen's tenure at the Department of Homeland Security was a disaster from the start, said Representative Benny Thompson, a Mississippi Democrat and the chairman of the House's Committee on Homeland Security. It is clearer now, Mr. Trump eventually moved to halt the family separations, though the government struggled in some cases to reunite those it had already separated. The Department of Homeland Security, which has a budget of more than $40 billion and more than 240,000 employees, is an amalgam of 22 government agencies that was created after the September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks. It is responsible. At 46, Ms. Nielsen was the youngest person to lead the sprawling department, and an unlikely choice for the job. In the months immediately after the September 11 attacks, she helped set up the Transportation Security Administration, now an agency within the department. She also worked. Nielsen was expected to become Undersecretary for the department's National Protection and Programs Directorate, responsible for the federal government's cyber defenses. But as secretary, when Mr. Trump moved Mr. Kelly to the White House in July 2017, Ms. Nielsen moved with him. As the principal, Mr. Kelly later backed Ms. Nielsen to succeed him at the Homeland Security Department, though she was criticized as too inexperienced for the job by Democrats and anti-immigration groups. Mr. Trump, there will be no on-the-job training for Kirstjen, Mr. Trump said in October 2017, announcing her nomination for the post. But by the following spring, Ms. Nielsen was telling associates she was miserable in the job. Get politics in Washington news updates via and. Maggie Haberman reported from New York, and Michael D. Shear from San Diego. Eric Schmidt and
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. You fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.